My marriage turned out to be a major regret, perhaps the biggest one of my life. The issue wasn't primarily with my wife, who was decent in many respects. The real problem lay with her mother, who harbored a deep animosity towards me and never missed a chance to be unpleasant. Admittedly, I'm no saint, nor am I entirely a villain. Like everyone, I have my flaws and virtues. I've never claimed to be perfect, and truthfully, I've been involved in some questionable activities, though I've managed to avoid any serious legal trouble, thanks in part to my friend Nicholas, who was studying law at the time. Nicholas and I have been friends since our school days. He's a small, bespectacled guy who always preferred books over teasing girls. When some boys at school targeted him for bullying, I stood up for him and made it clear that I wouldn't tolerate anyone mistreating him. A couple of them tested me, and I followed through on my word. Today, at 32, I'm self-employed as a rock driller, earning well by drilling deep holes for thermal heating tubes. I've been married to Lizette for nearly 6 years, and we have a son born shortly after our wedding. We live in a pleasant house in a small Scandinavian town, which could make us seem like an ordinary family. However, the presence of Lizette's mother, whom I refer to as the dragon, continues to complicate things due to her intense disapproval of me, especially since I got Lizette pregnant before she had chosen a boyfriend approved by her mother. While I've faced many challenges, I remain hopeful of prevailing in the end. The whole saga began on Midsummer Eve about 6 years ago, a significant night in Scandinavia marked by festivities under the midnight sun. At that time, I was engaged to Lottie, and we were planning our move into a new apartment. However, a dispute arose when she was invited to her cousin's wedding without me, a breach of etiquette for engaged couples who are typically treated as equals to married ones. This exclusion felt like a personal slight due to my past reputation. Despite acknowledging my point, Lottie chose not to stay home, leading to a rift between us. If the wedding had been on any other weekend, I would have gladly avoided it altogether. Even if I had been invited, I would have tried my best to find an excuse not to attend. I didn't blame Lottie's cousin for choosing her guests or skipping those she didn't like. My frustration was with Lottie for accepting such a humiliating invitation on Midsummer Eve, one of the most significant days of the year. We argued, and when she stormed out of my apartment in anger on the morning of Midsummer Eve, our engagement ended. I told her that if her cousin was more important to her than me, she could stay there forever because I didn't want her back. An hour later, I regretted losing her and tried calling her several times, but her phone was off. Lottie and I were also invited to a big party at a friend's cottage. I went alone and had a good time as a newly single man. At the party, I danced several times with a girl named Lizette, who was there with her timid fiancé struggling with alcohol. I didn't know Lizette well at the time, but I found her quite attractive. When her boyfriend became too intoxicated, I offered to help her get him settled in the back seat of his car. Lizette and I returned to the party briefly before taking a romantic twilight walk to a nearby lake. Sitting on a small pier, we began kissing passionately. She seemed intrigued by my reputation as a bad boy. It's an age-old mystery why attractive women often gravitate towards such men. Things progressed naturally between us, and in the guest room booked by Lizette and her boyfriend for the night, we shared an intimate moment. She expressed her love for me, and there were no objections as we became physically intimate. Later that night, I discovered to my surprise that Lizette was a virgin. It felt like a significant conquest at the time. She didn't bleed much and only felt slight discomfort during our first encounter, but she assured me it felt good for her. Afterward, we made love twice more. Though we didn't use protection, I promised to be careful and did my utmost to honor that promise. We fell asleep and only woke up the next morning when Lizette's boyfriend discovered us naked in bed and erupted in fury. He promptly ended their engagement by throwing the ring at her. After Lottie returned from the wedding, she called me and admitted regretting her decision to attend. She acknowledged I was right about being the only guest without a significant other, which had deeply humiliated her and soured the event. She had tried to reach out to me multiple times during Midsummer Eve, as I discovered from my phone's messages later. She pleaded to meet and discuss our situation, and I reluctantly agreed. However, an hour after finding out about my encounter with Lizette, she called again in a fury, declaring she was glad our engagement was over. Initially indifferent, I tried contacting her 2 weeks later, hoping she had cooled down, only to receive the same dismissive response each time. I even attempted to reach Lizette, but she refused to see me. I had almost moved on when, 2 months later, she unexpectedly appeared at my door looking anxious, wanting to talk. I invited her in. Straight to the point, she tearfully revealed she was pregnant, and I was the father. We spent hours discussing the situation. Lizette confessed I was her first and only sexual partner, and despite the unexpected pregnancy, she intended to keep the baby. She asked if I was prepared to face the consequences together. Realizing the importance of both parents for a child, I agreed to give our relationship a fair chance. Lizette, though not as striking as Lottie, was attractive, gentle, and known for being family-oriented. We decided to marry soon. While acknowledging that our holy night had been fueled by intense passion, we believed love could grow further once our child arrived. That night, we made love tenderly, affirming my commitment to make the best of our situation. The next day, we visited Lizette's parents to share the news. It turned out to be my first and last visit to their home. Lizette's mother reacted vehemently, accusing me of corrupting her daughter and threatening legal action against me. Her father remained silent, appearing powerless in the face of his wife's outburst. Clearly, they were not the most welcoming in-laws. Lizette's family had once owned a prominent print shop, but it was now struggling due to fierce competition within the expanded European Union. Despite past prosperity, they had not invested sufficiently in modern equipment, losing customers and slipping into financial difficulties. At that time, I was unemployed, and Lizette's mother saw an opportunity to exert control over me by demanding I work at their struggling print shop for a meager wage. I declined, opting instead to rely on my unemployment benefits, which provided more income. With plenty of free time on my hands, I also took on well-paying extra work for a rock drilling company. Lizette's mother retaliated by reporting me to the unemployment office for refusing a job offer, though her complaint yielded no consequences. Her next move was to have a lawyer draft a prenuptial agreement that heavily favored her daughter, ensuring I would have no rights if our marriage faltered, a scheme to safeguard her interests. Sensing the injustice, I had Niklas revise the document to a fairer arrangement, which Lizette signed without her mother's knowledge. 2 months later, Lizette and I married in a simple ceremony at the town hall, witnessed by Niklas and her best friend. 5 months after that, we welcomed our first child, a son. Our relationship blossomed into what felt like genuine love over the next 2.5 years, which were undoubtedly the happiest of our marriage. Shortly after our wedding, an opportunity arose for me to purchase a rock drilling business under favorable terms. The previous owner, inspired by a newfound passion for square dancing and a chance romance with a doctor who relocated to northern Norway for a lucrative job, sold me the business with their backing. Securing a bank loan with their personal guarantees was straightforward. However, when our son reached 2.5 years and began daycare, challenges surfaced. Lizette returned to work at the print shop, where her mother's influence, driven by her aspirations to take over the business, grew stronger. During this period, her mother's investments in stocks took a downturn due to poor advice from her broker, resulting in substantial losses. Meanwhile, I capitalized on insider information provided by Niklas, now a lawyer, investing wisely and reaping substantial profits during a company boom. Unable to resist the urge to assert myself against Lizette's mother, I boasted to Lizette about significant profits made through a new computer analysis program. To further taunt her, I surprised Lizette with a nearly new Toyota Yaris for her use as a shopping car. Naturally, Lizette shared the news with her mother, who became envious and urged Lizette to uncover my next investment move. I enlisted Niklas to fabricate a complex, misleading Excel program predicting substantial gains from supposed junk stocks and Mega X. Convinced by the facade, Lizette's mother made a substantial investment just before the stocks plummeted disastrously. One evening, Lizette asked me, "Have you lost any money on Mega X stocks?" "No," I replied. "I bought them low and sold everything at their peak." "Good for us." "Why do you ask?" "I've heard rumors that some people lost a lot of money on them." Trading stocks is always risky. I had won a significant battle against Lizette's mother by making a profitable investment, but she suspected my motives were malicious. Consequently, rumors circulated in town that she planned to intensify efforts to cause trouble for me. Her long-standing animosity was driven by a desire to see me coupled, divorced, and stripped of my possessions before our son started school. She often invited young, single acquaintances and sons of business associates to her gatherings, hoping one would seduce Lizette. Many of these men were well-educated and charming, and she believed one would inevitably succeed, much like how I had a girlfriend when she had a boyfriend. Her continuous pressure aimed to influence Lizette into leaving me and gaining control of my assets to invest in the failing print shop. Hatred, revenge, and financial gain fueled her ruthless game against me. When I confronted Lizette about her mother's bet, warning her that any infidelity would result in her immediate expulsion from our home, she reacted angrily. "What the hell do you think of me?" she shouted. "Do you think I'm unaware of that damn bet? I'd be furious if anyone tried anything." "Good," I replied firmly. "Stick to that, and we won't need to discuss it further." As Lizette resumed full-time work, our family life began to deteriorate. I desired another child, but she refused. Our once fulfilling sex life, vibrant during her time at home with our child, became routine. Initially understanding of her efforts to salvage the print shop, I refrained from complaint. Despite my successful business endeavors, which thrived due to rising oil prices and increased demand for thermal heating systems, I suggested Lizette join me in my business. However, she declined, remaining loyal to her mother's struggling enterprise. Despite my busy schedule, I made every effort to support Lizette at home as much as possible. While our marriage wasn't perfect, it remained at acceptable levels for many years after she returned to work. We still shared good moments occasionally. I tried earnestly to persuade her to leave her poorly paid job and break free from her mother's influence, but unfortunately, things took a turn for the worse. Lizette started taking our child with her, spending more weekends at her parents' summer house than at home. Eventually, I reached my limit, and we had our first serious argument. She acknowledged her mother's overbearing influence and agreed to spend more time with our family. However, this turned out to be a fleeting promise. Just 3 months after our argument, she reverted to her old habits. As a result, our social life with friends dwindled to almost nothing. I wasn't naive enough to ignore that after years of futile attempts, her mother had finally succeeded in driving us apart. Our son mentioned seeing Tommy kissing Mom after returning from their last weekend at her mother's place. While not unexpected, it confirmed that our marriage was in serious trouble, despite my efforts to be a good husband. Surprisingly, alongside sadness over the impending failure, I felt a growing sense of relief. The prospect of a future without my intrusive mother-in-law disrupting my life seemed increasingly appealing. Over the years, Lizette had consistently sided with her mother, so I was indifferent to whether she would choose her mother once more. However, I felt obligated to give her one last fair chance to salvage our marriage. That opportunity came the following Friday evening. Lizette, as usual, informed me she needed to visit her mother on Saturday morning and would return late Sunday, prompting me to confront her. "Please reconsider," I pleaded. "You were there last weekend. Why not stay home so we can spend time together as a family? We could invite friends over for a barbecue. It's been a while since we've done something like that." She looked taken aback and replied, "I promised Mother I would be there to help with her visitors." "Her visitors?" I retorted. "Why are they more important than our friends? Or is there a particular male friend, this Tommy, who will be there?" She looked momentarily surprised and apprehensive when I mentioned Tommy. Then she responded, "He's an old family friend who helps my mother, and occasionally me, understand some EU regulations. He's not a friend of mine, so I'm not sure if my mother invited him." "How old is he?" "I think he's around 30. And a good-looking single guy, I assume?" "No, he's married, but his wife is on a 3-month temporary assignment with the United Nations in Kosovo. That's why he's available to help my mother on weekends." Her explanation about Tommy assisting with EU rules seemed plausible, but I couldn't understand why a man of his age would choose to spend weekends with such a difficult person. "And what's your relationship with Tommy? It seems you'd rather spend weekends with him than with your husband." Once again, I noticed a brief flicker of fear in her eyes before she replied, "It's strictly business, of course." "What do you take me for?" "I don't know anymore. You cheated on your previous boyfriend when we met. Who's to say you won't cheat again? Don't insult me. That was different. I was young and in love with you, and you know I still love you. You say that, but let's be clear about where we stand today. Your actions are hardly showing love. Our marriage is falling apart, our sex life is nearly non-existent. You prefer to abandon me and spend weekends with Tommy, who seems eager for some company while his wife is away. No one with common sense would believe he's interested in your mother. You're a beautiful woman, Lizette, and it's hard to believe he's not interested in you. I love you, she insisted, and I can't understand why you don't believe me. I'm tired of your mother's interference in our lives, I continued, and I'm ready to discuss fair terms for a divorce so you can be with Tommy. She hadn't expected me to mention divorce, and her face went pale as she exclaimed, "Divorce? Are you serious? You can't just divorce me because I want to see my mother. That's absurd." It's not about seeing your mother, I countered, but about spending every weekend from morning till night with Tommy. If your family still matters to you, skip Tommy this weekend. Let's stay home and talk about our issues. If you truly love me as you say, please do this. Of course I love you, but I've promised my mother I'll go, and I must go. I'm sorry I can't stay with you, but please be patient. Next Friday is Midsummer Eve, and we'll spend the whole day together. In July, we'll have an entire week at the summer house, 24 hours a day. What a gesture. At the end of next month, I get a whole week with my lovely wife. It's a gift from heaven. Shall I assume your kindness on Midsummer Eve is because Tommy will be elsewhere during the holidays? Perhaps he's spending time with his wife and won't have time for you? Or do you remember why I ended things with Lottie for abandoning me on Midsummer Eve? You're not funny, she sobbed. You're pathetic. Is it funny being married to you? You have a peculiar way of showing your love. Fine, Lizette, I can't stop you from seeing that guy, because he seems more important to you than your family. Take our kid with you tomorrow, though, as I'll be servicing the drilling equipment and can't look after him. She was furious now, accusing me of cheating, calling me names. Mother was right about you. You're a real jerk. She burst into tears. That was the breaking point for me. I realized something was going on between her and Tommy, but I no longer cared. There was little left of our marriage, if anything at all. Despite my efforts to save it, I knew it was over. The only reason I didn't kick her out then, and there was the potential advantage of catching her in the act for a better divorce settlement. I saw no point in arguing further with Lizette. I needed a break from home, so I decided to go to my favorite pub for a whiskey. It turned out to be a great decision. After a drink at the bar, I noticed Mona, a friend of my ex-girlfriend Lottie, sitting with her husband in a booth. I approached him and asked how Lottie was doing these days. She's back in town, didn't you know? She divorced Sven and bought a small house here, moved in about 2 weeks ago. She's been asking about you. Why don't you call her directly instead of through me? Mona replied. She gave me Lottie's phone number, and I decided to call her immediately. I took a chance, thinking, who dares wins. Lottie answered the phone. Lottie. Hi, I'm Michael, your old ex-boyfriend, remember me? Mona mentioned you're back in town, and I just wanted to say welcome back. This was the pivotal moment. How would she react to my call? To my delight, she sounded genuinely pleased to hear from me, and we had a long, pleasant conversation. She even accepted my invitation to lunch on Saturday. Later that evening, I was in high spirits and spent the rest of the time with Mona and her husband. Thankfully, Lizette pretended to be asleep when I arrived home, and I was asleep when she left for her mother's the next morning. I spent the morning servicing my drilling equipment, and by 1 o'clock, I was waiting for Lottie outside the restaurant where we planned to have lunch. I couldn't deny feeling almost the same nervous excitement I had on our first date nearly 8 years ago. 15 minutes passed, and I began to doubt if she would show up at all. Then she appeared. Lottie was still as beautiful as ever, perhaps even more refined than when I last saw her years ago. She had her daughter Jennifer with her. When she hugged me, I felt a strong surge of desire, but I restrained myself and remained just a friend. We had a delightful lunch and decided to take a walk in the nearby park afterward. During our walk, she suddenly asked me, "What was your real reason for wanting to see me again?" "Faith, hope, and charity," I replied. Her expression turned puzzled. "Would it be okay if I tell you something I've wanted to say for many years?" "Of course, go ahead," I encouraged her. She confessed, "I've made 3 major mistakes in my life. The first was attending that damn wedding. You were right, I was humiliated when they constantly paired me with the groom's insufferable brother. When the groom implied I had feelings for him, I lost my temper and left the party. Not inviting them to Sven's and my wedding made matters worse. I thought you'd forgive me and take me back when I returned, but then Lizette's boyfriend called and informed me you had taken her virginity, which she had saved for their wedding night. I was still in love with you and acted impulsively by refusing to speak with you when you called. I got back with Sven only to hurt you and planned to leave him to be with you. Then Lizette became pregnant, and everything became a mess. I admired you for taking care of her, but cried many nights over losing you. Marrying Sven was my third mistake. If only I hadn't been so foolish, you and I could have been the ones married instead." I responded, "I made a serious mistake too when I pursued Lizette that midsummer eve. Yes, we had broken up, so technically I was free to do as I pleased, but I should have used better judgment and tried to reconcile with you before moving forward. Believe me, I've regretted it deeply many times. But perhaps it's not too late to give us another chance, or is it?" She was taken aback. "What are you saying?" "Lizette and I are facing serious issues. I suspect she's cheating on me, though I don't have concrete proof yet. Last night, before I went to the pub and met Mona, I asked her to stay home this weekend instead of going to see her mother and her lover, but she chose to go. I've decided we're finished. I'm going to file for divorce as soon as I gather the evidence I need, or if that fails, within the next month anyway." "Oh my God. I thought you two were happy." "We were very happy. You know the saying, if you can't be with the one you love, love the one you're with? It applied to us. Over time, I grew to truly love her. But that's over now. What about you? Have you been seeing someone?" She met my gaze directly and replied, "Yes, I've met a handsome man online, but we haven't met in person yet. We're having our first lunch date tomorrow." "So I'm too late to ask you out?" "Well, I'd like to apply as a backup option in case he doesn't turn out to be your Prince Charming. What do you think?" She kept staring at me and paused for a moment before responding, "Isn't this lunch date a real date for you?" I could only say, "Meeting you today has been the highlight of my recent days, but I'm selfish enough to want more from you, perhaps even something beyond friendship." She shook her head. "No, I don't think having you as a backup is a good idea at all." Then, noticing the disappointment in my eyes, she added, "You're my first choice. If you're serious and promise to be honest with me, I won't need any backups, and I'll cancel my date. It's my lucky day today. Please remember, I never cheated on you when we were engaged. You ended things, and I was single when I met Lizette. I won't cheat on her before we part ways. But you and I have kids around the same age, and we can start as friends, if you're open to it. I've rented a lovely summer house by the coast for the 3rd week of July, and I can assure you that Lizette and I will have gone our separate ways by then." Lottie invited me to dinner at her home that evening, and we began making plans for the upcoming weeks. Jennifer and I were already close friends, and she harbored no ill feelings about her mother having a boyfriend. I spent the night in Lottie's spare room, and on Sunday, we took a trip to the coast. Lizette returned home late that evening, and we exchanged few words before heading to bed. The following week passed quietly between us. It was evident she was in a sour mood after my divorce suggestion, and neither of us made any effort to initiate intimacy. The approaching Friday was Midsummer Eve. Lottie and Jennifer spent it with Lottie's parents. Lizette and I were invited to a neighbor's house, where several families with children of various ages gathered. We spent most of the afternoon playing with the kids. In the evening, the adults engaged in games and dancing, yet I barely interacted with Lizette and didn't dance with her at all. Though she typically maintained the facade of a loving wife in public, neither of us cared to conceal the cold atmosphere between us. On Midsummer Day, Lizette visited her mother but returned home that evening, perhaps because Tommy wasn't there. Lottie had invited me to join her at her parents' home, where I spent a few hours. They wished us both well in our new relationship. The following week after midsummer passed with chilly interactions between Lizette and me. We remained polite and courteous, but there was no hint of affection. Naturally, intimacy was out of the question. Lizette anticipated companionship from Tommy, while I eagerly looked forward to spending time with Lottie. The subsequent weekend, Lizette took our son on a 3-day coach tour to Legoland with her parents, followed by our annual 2-day visit to her cousin. I was delighted to spend 4 nights at Lottie's house. Though both Lottie and I desired intimacy, we agreed to wait, mindful that if Lizette contested the divorce, it would be advantageous to have remained faithful. During Lizette's absence, Lottie, her daughter, and I enjoyed each other's company immensely. It was clear that Lottie and I still cherished each other deeply, a true love indeed. Usually busy with our jobs during the summer, Lizette and I had planned only 2 weeks of holiday each, with our final week together in the coastal summer house I had rented. Our usual summer holiday plans had included a 2-week trip to Thailand in November. However, given the current circumstances with Tommy and Lizette's life, I had no intention of going anywhere with her. Instead, I had promised Lottie that I would end things with Lizette before our week in the summer house, and she agreed to spend it with me. I was determined to keep my promise. I believe Lizette finally realized the gravity of the issues she had caused in our marriage, perhaps more than she intended. She started making efforts to portray herself as a good wife again. To my surprise, she called me every evening during her absence, expressing how much she missed me. This was unprecedented, considering she had never called me during all those weekends spent at her parents' place. Each time she called, I made sure to speak briefly with my son. On their second day at Legoland, I asked him a series of simple questions, all of which he affirmed with a yes. One of these questions was whether Tommy was with them, to which he confirmed. I don't think any of the adults noticed. I suspected her call stemmed from guilt about bringing Tommy along. When they returned home and stayed one night before their next trip, I received further confirmation from my son. He asked me if it was true that wolves could enter our house and harm him. "Who told you such a scary story?" I asked. "Grandma." "Why would Grandma tell you such a scary lie? What did you do to her?" "Nothing, but we have a secret. If I tell you, the wolves will come and get me." Trying a different approach, I said, "What secret?" "That Tommy was with you and Mom isn't a real secret. Your mom told me you and Tommy shared a room, and you and Grandma slept in another." "You knew my secret." "Yes, I did, but secrets are just that. There are no wolves, of course not. Promise me you won't tell Mom we talked about your secret." Lizette had allowed her mother to threaten my son. She would have to face consequences. My next move was calling Nicholas to share my troubles and cancel my visit. Then, I spoke with Lottie and my friend Dan, both of whom agreed to help. For a man like Tommy, bedding a married woman in her own bed usually provides an extra thrill, a sense of superiority over the cuckolded husband. I anticipated Tommy wouldn't resist such temptation during my holiday, so I had installed an expensive, discreet wireless camera in our bedroom. The receiver connected to a video recorder with a long-playing tape was hidden in the garage. The camera was equipped with a motion sensor and worked in low-light conditions. I had tested it multiple times successfully, so it was ready. In my company's Nissan King cab, I stashed new locks for the house and cardboard boxes to pack Lizette's belongings when the time came for her to move out. After enduring 2 painful days at home, with Lizette putting on a facade of being a caring wife, I packed clothes for myself and our son for our planned holiday week. On Saturday morning, we left as scheduled. Lizette expressed regret that she had to stay home and work, claiming she would miss us deeply. I avoided kissing her goodbye but promised to call her at least once a day. As we departed, she stood on the driveway waving at us. I felt a pang of sadness seeing how the woman I had loved had transformed into such a deceitful person. Instead of heading to Nikla's summer house, I drove to Lottie's garage where I parked my car. Niklas and his wife were briefed on my situation and agreed to cover for me if Lizette called. At 6 in the evening, Lottie passed by my house without noticing anything unusual. She made another round at 8 and informed me that this time she saw a silver metallic Volvo XC90 in my driveway. During summer, it was common for people to visit friends and relatives, so a strange car wouldn't raise suspicions among neighbors. I took a drive in Lottie's car at 11 and confirmed the Volvo was still there. At 1 in the morning, I used Lottie's bicycle to sneak into my garage and switch on the monitor. Bingo! It was exactly what I needed to see, Lizette and a man emerging naked from the bathroom, obviously after showering together. Knowing I now had irrefutable evidence for divorce on my terms, I started feeling slightly relieved amidst this chaotic situation. Lizette wasn't foolish by any means, which made me surprised at how careless she had been in her affair. It almost seemed like she wanted to get caught, making it easy for me to uncover her deception. First, she took Tommy along on our holiday trip, then allowed her mother to threaten our son with stories of wolves. Could she have wanted me to end our marriage so Tommy would have to take care of her? I waited until they were asleep before proceeding with my plan and continued observing them on the monitor. They lay naked on the bed, and Lizette said to him, "Let's get some sleep so we're in good shape for the grand finale goodbye fuck of our love story tomorrow morning." He replied, "I'll miss you so much. Every weekend without you will be agonizing, even when my wife is home. Can't we see each other at least once a month in the future? Because my marriage is in worse shape than I ever imagined. Michael is still furious about my weekends with you. He didn't even bother to kiss me goodbye when he left for a week. I made a terrible mistake by not staying home that damn weekend when he pleaded with me to do so. Our marriage has been a disaster ever since. You're a wonderful lover, but I want a good life with my husband again." "Too late for that, damn slut," I muttered to myself before Tommy replied. "You shouldn't regret that weekend. I gave you a good time, and surely once a month in the future could give us something to look forward to." After she sounded somewhat irritated, it was clear she had begun to feel remorse when she replied, "No, Tommy. Once you leave after breakfast, our wonderful love story is history. I'll transform back into a faithful, loving wife who will do everything, absolutely everything, to win her husband's love back again. But why think about that now? I'm still only yours until then. Be a good boy and let's not waste a single minute of our time." I couldn't hear his response, but evidently he wasn't up for any further activity without resting for a few hours, and eventually they both fell asleep. I pressed a button on my cell phone. My friend Dan woke up after a few signals, and I informed him, "I've hit the jackpot. Are you ready for some action?" He assured me he'd be there within 15 minutes. While I could have handled Tommy on my own, I wanted Dan there primarily as a witness to ensure no accusations of violence from Lizette or her mother. Going alone, I suspected her mother might concoct a story and sue me for aggression. Additionally, Dan owned a high-quality video camera, frequently used for weddings, and I needed clear evidence. He arrived promptly, and after a brief discussion of our plan, we sneaked into my house. The door to the master bedroom was shut. I cracked it open slightly to observe them both sleeping under the blanket, close together. Once Dan had his camera ready, he nodded, and I whispered, "Let's do it." I swung the door wide open, and Dan switched on the bright battery-operated halogen light, capturing everything on tape. I approached the bed, gently removed the blanket without waking them, and allowed Dan to film for at least 5 seconds before I exclaimed, "What the hell is going on here?" Startled, they awoke in confusion. It took them a moment to comprehend the situation as their eyes adjusted to the sudden brightness. Then, Lizette recognized me and began screaming, "No, no, no." I took over the camera and instructed Dan to remove the naked Tommy from my house. He firmly grabbed Tommy by the hair, pulled him out of bed and out of the bedroom. There was some commotion and shouting outside, but I remained in the bedroom unable to witness what occurred. After a while, Dan returned, searching for Tommy's keys. He found them in his pants, threw them out onto the driveway, and we heard Tommy drive off, completely naked. Meanwhile, Lizette had ceased screaming and started crying. It seemed she realized her actions had brought an end to the game, as she didn't attempt to explain. I addressed her firmly, "Our marriage is over. Get dressed and leave my house. Your car is no longer here. Dan will arrange a taxi for you. New locks will be installed tomorrow. I'll pack your things in boxes for you to collect in the afternoon." She shouted back, "You can't do this. You have no right to treat me this way. I won't accept it. I don't care what you accept or not. Review our prenuptial agreement, which you have in your bank safe. You're no longer welcome here. Please, don't do this. Let's calm down and talk. We can talk tomorrow. Be here at 4 to pick up your belongings and divide our assets. Come alone. Your parents aren't allowed on my property. The taxi arrived and waited 10 minutes until she was ready to leave. Dan went home, and I called Lottie to inform her about finding Lizette with Tommy in our bed, signaling the end of our marriage. I stayed in the house until I changed the locks, feeling a mix of victory and sadness for how it all ended. Unable to sleep, I retrieved the video cassette from the garage, inserted it into the player, rewound it, and pressed play. It started with Lizette, dressed provocatively, leading Tommy into our bedroom. She looked more alluring than she had in years, clearly enjoying herself. Inside the bedroom, she boasted about our expensive new bed, cautioning him not to mess it up. He silenced her with a deep kiss, undressed her, and they engaged intimately. To my surprise, she wore sexy black stay-up stockings instead of pantyhose. I had once suggested she wear something similar, but she accused me of being perverse for even suggesting it. Clearly, Tommy was receiving more attention from her than I ever had. She lifted her hips so he could slide down her black panties. Keeping her stockings and high heels on, he kissed her intimately and, without removing his shirt and tie, positioned himself between her legs and began thrusting vigorously, like a rabbit, until he climaxed within a minute. She cleaned him with a towel, then asked him to remove his shirt and tie. She had him lie down and performed oral sex on him. He took her from behind in a slower, more deliberate pace this time. After a while, he inserted a finger into her anus, surprising me again, as she had never allowed me that. It took some time, but eventually, he brought her to orgasm and then climaxed himself. Afterwards, he mentioned, "Next time will be the one I've been dreaming of for weeks." She replied, "I hope it's worth the wait. I promised only once, and never again. Promise me you'll never let your husband touch that part of you. Let it be mine, and mine alone." "Of course. You'll be the only one." She sent him to the bathroom to clean up, then rolled a condom onto his now erect penis. She lay on her stomach with her legs apart, telling him, "My last indulgence for you." Using a lubricant she provided, he prepared her anus with his fingers before slowly penetrating her. She cried out and sobbed in pain, which seemed to excite him more, and he thrust intensely until collapsing on top of her. They lay in silence for a long time until she said, "We need to shower." "Together," he replied. The screen remained empty for a while until it showed what I had already seen during the night, and later when Dan and I entered the room and woke them up. Still too upset to sleep, I began removing Lizette's clothes from the closets and drawers and placed them in the living room. At 9 in the morning, Lottie and the kids arrived at my house with breakfast in a basket. When I searched Tommy's wallet, I found a phone number for his wife in Kosovo. I called her and informed her that I had discovered Tommy and my wife naked in our bed, and that I had videotaped him engaging in intimate acts with her. She was furious, but asked me to send pictures to her email, which I agreed to do after editing a copy of the video to show Lizette if she objected to my terms. After changing the locks, I packed Lizette's belongings neatly, labeling each box with its contents. I felt no desire for revenge by damaging or ruining any of her things. Instead, I used a chainsaw to dismantle our nearly new and very expensive marital bed into small pieces, which I then piled up by the driveway. Lottie and the kids even brought me lunch, giving me a break from the task. At 4 o'clock, Lizette arrived alone in the old Ford Transit from the printing company. She stared for a long time at the pile that had once been our expensive bed before entering. I had coffee ready in the living room and asked her to sit down. She accepted, sat down, and began sobbing, launching into a long list of how much she still loved me and how sorry she was for making a terrible mistake. She pleaded for forgiveness, promising to work less, spend all weekends with the family, never attend parties or dinners at her mother's without me, and even suggested having another child together. I responded, 3 weeks ago, those promises might have saved our marriage. But today, after everything that's happened since then, it's too late, Lizette. I'm sorry, but there's no future for us anymore. She started her plea again, and I let her speak. When she finished, I asked her, "Did you really think I was such a fool to believe your lies about Tommy, a 30-year-old who spent his weekends with such an unsavory woman as your mother? Even if I were thinking irrationally, I should have realized there were younger and more attractive options for him." She didn't respond, so I continued, "You're a beautiful woman, Lizette, so I can't blame him entirely. But I do blame you for allowing him to destroy our marriage and make our child so unhappy. Why, Lizette? Why did you have to betray me with that man? I may not have been your first choice, or your best, but I married you when you needed me, and I even fell in love with you, Lizette. I have been faithful to you until this very moment." She sobbed, "It's not your fault. I never stopped loving you. You're my only true love, but I know you've been with other women while I've only been with you. I'm sorry and truly regret that I couldn't resist the temptation, just once, with another man. I promise I have no desire to do that again." I replied, "Well, now that you've gotten what you wanted, I hope you're happy. Your damn mother must be thrilled too. She's gotten her way all these years. Please make her even happier by letting her know I don't give a damn about what you did, because your affair has freed me to marry a woman who truly loves me. Didn't you understand you ended our marriage that Friday before midsummer when I asked you to spend the weekend with your family, but you chose to be with Tommy at your mother's instead? Did you really think I'd accept being cuckolded? The only reason I didn't throw you out then was to gather evidence of your cheating so I could divorce you without paying a cent. Remember, I even offered you a fair divorce, but you surprisingly refused. A smart woman like you should have known I'd never accept being a cuckolded husband to a cheating wife. I didn't want a divorce then, and I don't want one now because I love you. Of course, I knew our son had told you about Tommy and you were suspicious. But I never expected you to get proof. I regretted the affair and promised myself Tommy would be my first and last infidelity, but I decided to go through with it as planned. That night at our house was supposed to be the grand finale, my last time with him, and my last cheating ever. Honestly, I was relieved when it was over, and I can't deny your behavior since that Friday made me fear for our marriage. When you started ignoring me and refusing sex, I realized I needed to be a good wife again to win back your love. I wanted to spoil you during our summer week at the house, try to get pregnant soon, and give you the child you've always wanted. I've even been looking for a new job. I'm afraid it's too late now." I replied, "You're right. That Friday before midsummer was your final chance. You didn't care about me then, and after last night, there's only one solution to our problems." I handed her the divorce papers and said, "Please sign these so we can make this easy." "What do you mean?" "Whichever way you prefer, whether it's through cooperation or contention, everything will adhere to the terms of our prenuptial agreement. You have a copy stored in your private bank deposit box. You will receive everything that rightfully belongs to you, and I will retain what is mine, which includes nearly everything except your clothing. I seek custody of our son, but you may visit him regularly once you have your own residence. However, I cannot allow him to be taken to the current unfit environment where you reside." Her face paled as she asked, "Are you saying I have no rights to any of our assets?" "All right. The house, the cars, my stocks, bank accounts, and the drilling company are all my personal assets. Please remember that it was your mother who insisted on us having a prenuptial agreement. I've worked hard and been well compensated for it. I've covered all the expenses here, whereas your mother has only given you pocket money, hardly enough for your clothing. I've hired professionals to look into the printing business and found out what you probably already know. It's heading towards bankruptcy by the end of the year. Your mother owes you a significant amount of money. You need to assert your claim before her business goes bankrupt, otherwise the bank will take everything. If you agree to cooperate in our divorce, I can cover the cost of a lawyer to help you recover what is owed to you. Your mother will lose everything regardless, so it's in both her and your best interest that you secure what's rightfully yours. While your mother may see this as a wake-up call, my primary reason for assisting you in this matter is to ensure you can afford a suitable apartment where you can take our son when it's your turn to have him. I'm thinking of our child, and you are still his mother, despite what has transpired between us." Now she began her litany about how sorry she was and how much she regretted everything she had done. I interrupted her by saying, "Please remember how I begged you to stop it and stay home one weekend with me, but you preferred going to fuck Tommy instead of staying home with your family. You made your choice then, and now I've made mine. Her next effort was to try and tell me that Tommy had never fucked her, they had only done some almost innocent necking. I pushed the button on the remote control, the video player turned on and our home movie screen began to show selected nasty parts of the videotape with her sucking and licking Tommy's cock and then the ass fucking. Lizette screamed hysterically, "Stop it, stop it, stop it." I pressed the stop button and said to her, "I'm sorry, Lizette. That's too much for a husband to bear. Why did you do this to me? Why didn't you just ask for a divorce? You would have gotten better terms than what you'll get now. Why humiliate me with that guy?" She realized the game was up and started sobbing. I continued, "What's done is done and can't be undone, but we can try to find a fair solution. If your mother interferes again or tries to play games, this video will be online for the whole town to see what my ex-wife has been up to. Do you understand?" Now she was frightened and shouted, "You can't do that. What will I do? I have nothing left, and even my job is in trouble. Perhaps it's best you take the easy route for our divorce. Accept the terms in our premarital agreement and my conditions without argument. I'll help you get your final paycheck. Remember, you still have Tommy. He can take care of you like I did when you cheated on your previous boyfriend. He can't. He's married. Not for long. His wife wasn't happy when I spoke with her this morning. By noon, she'd seen some pictures and clips from my video, which I emailed to her. She's planning to leave him. Good news for you, Lizette. Tommy will be all yours." "Oh my God, you're insane. How could you break up their marriage?" "It wasn't hard. I found her phone number in his wallet he left here last night. Have you forgotten already that he screwed my wife in our bed and wrecked our marriage? Lottie and I had agreed that she wouldn't take anything from the house, and I only wanted everything in my home office, my expensive music and home theater system, and valuable artwork. We planned to meet the following Saturday to divide our family photos and videos. I let Lizette take whatever she wanted. She never mentioned the nearly new and very expensive marital bed, which I found dismantled and piled by the driveway. She promised to collect her things once she found her own apartment, and I planned to donate the rest to the local Salvation Army second-hand store. Lizette seemed relieved that I was making it easy for her to furnish her new place and agreed after some thought that receiving her final paycheck was fair. Lizette opted for the easy way, signed the divorce papers, and I helped her load her belongings into her van. After Lizette left my house, I went straight to Lottie's place where she had prepared a romantic dinner for us. Later, when the kids were asleep, we retreated to her bedroom where everything was set with fresh sheets. We embraced and kissed passionately, eagerly undressing each other. What followed could only be described as an expression of true love, transcending mere physical intimacy. It was a culmination of our long-awaited desire, and the night was truly special. Since then, life has been filled with joy and laughter when I return home after work. We've become a close-knit family, enjoying weekends together with fun activities. Lottie and I were pleasantly surprised at how quickly the children adjusted to our new arrangement, bonding well and playing happily together. The card was Dan's idea. I agreed, and he had his mother purchase a lovely greeting card. In her finest handwriting, she wrote, "Dear friends, I must commend you on winning the bet. You achieved every parent's dream by persuading your only daughter to leave her loving husband to become involved with a cheating married man. She must be grateful to you for life. Yours faithfully, a faithful friend." I sent it to Lizette's father, who, according to town rumors, had initially opposed having Tommy visit their home every weekend to pursue Lizette, but was overruled by his wife. After Lizette's emotional breakdown following our breakup, receiving the card was the final straw. He finally realized his wife's misguided influence and regretted not intervening sooner, feeling humiliated among his peers. After a heated argument that led to a physical altercation resulting in her hospitalization and his overnight stay at the police station, he packed his bags the day before she was discharged and left their home. Their divorce, uncomplicated by underage children, was finalized within 3 months. Following Lizette's decision to accept my divorce terms without contesting them or seeking her own lawyer, the process proceeded smoothly as planned. I gained custody of our child but assured Lizette that I wouldn't interfere with her access, allowing her up to 182 days a year once she had her own residence. However, I insisted our child not visit her mother's house or summer home. Lizette had no objections to the custody arrangement since her relationship with her mother had soured, leading her to quit her job at the printing business. When Lizette demanded her unpaid salary, her mother reacted angrily, refusing payment and prompting Lizette to sue her. Lizette won the case, and with the help of Niklas's lawyer, she recovered her money just weeks before the printing company went bankrupt, despite objections from the bank. Tommy's brief visit to celebrate his affair with Lizette at my home quickly turned disastrous. After I discovered him in my bed, he left naked in his Volvo, only to be caught by the police in a DUI checkpoint on his way home. Celebrating with dinner and my best Rioja wine and cognac had its consequences. He was taken to the police station for a blood test, fined heavily, and lost his driver's license for 2 years. True to her word, his wife promptly left him and filed for divorce. She now works for the UN in Geneva with her Italian colleague, whom she met during her UN assignment in Kosovo. Tommy tried to drown his sorrows with alcohol, resulting in a temporary leave from work. His promises to Lizette evaporated, and he ignored her attempts to reconnect. Lizette, with newfound independence from her mother, realized Tommy's true character and gave up on any hope of a future with him. With money from the printing business, she bought a nice apartment and quickly found a new job. While we co-parent effectively, personal discussions between Lizette and me are avoided. Lottie and I married soon after my divorce. We sold our respective homes and purchased one together. She's now pregnant, and with 3 children from different parents, we consider ourselves a modern and happy family. Thanks for watching and have a great day. Write your opinion in the comments.